Ladies and gentlemen, the time is finally here. It is this weekend. If you are as big a fan of the lightweight division of the UFC as I am, coming up this weekend, this is it. This is the fight that you've been waiting for. You've been waiting for this fight since June. Charles Oliveira is going to defend the lightweight championship of the world against Dustin Poirier. We are going to finally know indisputably who is the best fighter in what is not only the best division that the UFC has right now, but maybe the best division that has ever been in the sport of MMA. So before you look at anything else, that's how big the stakes are. The stakes are absolutely huge. And that's actually before you even look into just how high the stakes are for Charles Oliveira. Because for Charles Oliveira, the stakes are not just the question of whether or not he is the best 155-pound fighter in the world. There's a huge amount of national pride that's going along with this fight for Charles Oliveira. And if you need proof of that, you really don't need to look back any further than when he won the championship in that fight over Michael Chandler. When he went back to Rio and they threw him a parade and it was absolutely massive. I mean, name one other country in the world where they have championship parades for their MMA fighters when they come back with a new championship. I can't think of any. I don't even think the Jan Blachowicz got one in Poland, and MMA is absolutely massive in Poland. But Charles Oliveira, he did get one in Brazil. And there should be absolutely no doubt in anybody's mind about just how important the sport of mixed martial arts is to the people of Brazil. In recent months, it's manifested itself in so many ways we can actively observe. Here's one that doesn't seem as glorious as Charles Oliveira's championship win. Let's look back to Gilbert Burns, to his fight against Kamaru Usman for the welterweight championship of the world. Now let's look at what happened immediately after that fight. The first thing that Gilbert Burns did after he lost that fight was he started weeping. And I think that it says so much about the character of most MMA fans that he wasn't wildly condemned for this. He wasn't widely condemned for this. Nobody really made fun of him. I think everybody understood exactly how it was that he felt. Gilbert Burns walked into that fight with the pressure on his shoulders of trying to become the first welterweight champion of the world from the country of Brazil. They've never had one in the UFC. At this point, they are well overdue for it. It just wasn't to happen at that particular time. Kamaru Usman was too good in that fight. And Gilbert Burns, he had to have known that, but still, when the fight did not come out in his favor, all of that pressure on his shoulders, it just kind of exploded, and he wound up crying in the octagon. Not so much crying for himself, but he was really crying because he seemed to have felt like he let down all of his fans in Brazil. He wasn't crying for his own thwarted ambition. He was crying because he felt like he had disappointed his countrymen. And it's very hard not to feel for a guy like that, a guy that everybody knows is a tremendous personal character, a guy who's a very skilled fighter, a guy who brings it all to the cage. And yeah, he doesn't really fight in the way that a lot of fans seem to like, where they want everybody to have stand-up wars and just throw fists and kicks the whole time. Not really the way that Gilbert Burns fights. He's a jiu-jitsu guy, but he does give you everything that he has to give, and it's very hard not to feel for a guy like that when he has that kind of emotional reaction to that kind of pressure. Here's a more recent story, one with a happier ending. This past weekend, Jose Aldo fought Rob Font in the bantamweight division of the UFC. Going into that fight, everybody thought that he was the underdog. And as a matter of fact, it seems like recently it comes to light that Jose Aldo had been thinking about walking away from the sport altogether after he lost his fight to Peter Yan. And really, it's the kind of thing that underscores for you just how different MMA could be right now than what it is. I mean, Jose Aldo has been with us for so long, so respected and so beloved a fighter, that if he were to walk away from the sport, it would never be the same again. It would never feel the same again. No matter what came afterwards, it would always feel a little bit different. And Jose Aldo almost did that. But then something happened. a boxing trainer with the Brazilian Army reached out to him and said, hey, come train with us. Come train boxing with the Brazilian Army, and we'll see if we can get you back on the winning track again. And so Jose Aldo went and he trained boxing with the Brazilian Army. And what he basically found was that not only did he improve his striking skills significantly, he's never really wanted for them, but the skills that he had, he made that much better, and we saw that this past weekend. But he fell back in love with the sport of MMA again. Something that he had been contemplating walking away from. Now he's doubled down and he has refocused himself on it. And that was a result of something that I think it probably would not be unreasonable to look at as something that had basically become like a national project, for the people of Brazil. You have the Brazilian Army taking in an MMA fighter and helping them train and getting them back on track. That's a pretty big commitment of a lot of resources. Things that you would presume are intended to be there for the national defense of the country. And while Brazil doesn't really seem to have very many, international enemies, they do have a lot of, internal struggles with some of the, with some of the seedier factions within their country. And so you would think that the most important thing for the Brazilian boxing team to be doing would have been training Brazilian soldiers in hand-to-hand combat. And yet they still found that what Jose Aldo represents to that country in the sport of mixed martial arts, through the sport of mixed martial arts, was important enough for them to use those resources to help him get back to where he wants to be in the sport. That's how important the sport of MMA is to the people of Brazil. And that's what Charles Oliveira is going to be carrying with him into this fight with Dustin Poirier on the weekend. I mean, he is fighting for himself. No doubt about that. He is currently the UFC lightweight champion of the world. And really the time when a lot of fans had written off Charles Oliveira as a guy that was not going to make it are not as far removed as a lot of people probably think of it. But even more so for himself, he is fighting with an entire country at his back. And fighting like that as a guy with the kind of skills that Charles Oliveira has. Fighting with that much support at your back as a guy who can finish fights. Anybody who thinks this is going to be just a walk for Dustin Poirier, they have not considered what it is Charles Oliveira is fighting for. Because he's not just fighting for himself. He's not just fighting for that championship that he has not yet defended. He's fighting for an entire country. And as I think that we saw this past weekend with Jose Aldo, that can make all the difference.